And I think about it, the whole like concept of being on autopilot. You're just going through the motions and you're stuck in this pattern of rinse, wash, and repeat. And it's easy to get stuck in that because you're doing the work, you're just going about it and you just head down.
This is the Angel Next Door podcast, where we will talk about all things angel investing. What it is, who does it, how do we find them, what does it mean to invest in an early stage company? If you have ever wondered how you can affect the change you want to see in the world, then tune in to learn more. In this episode, I'm talking with Tony Martignetti, leadership coach, author, and founder of Inspired Purpose Partners, for an inspiring conversation about what it truly means to be an effective leader in today's fast-changing world. Tony shares his personal journey from corporate world to coaching, explains the power behind analogies like leaders as lighthouses, and reveals how his best-selling books encourage leaders to define their own success and rediscover their hidden brilliance. We discuss actionable tips for bringing more of your authentic self to your work, why multidimensional leadership is a key in the age of AI, and how storytelling can unlock connection and impact in your organization. Enjoy the show. Well, Tony, welcome to the Angel Next Door podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited about our conversation today.
I know your background is so interesting, and we talk to founders and investors on the show, and we have a lot going on with what we can do in order to help businesses grow and scale, and leadership is definitely one of them, and I know that's one of your many background expertise. So start off, tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are, being a author of 2 books and having a company all focused on leadership.
Yeah. And so thank you. First of all, before I get into the work I'm doing now, I spent many years working in high tech and then biotech, but particularly focused on finance and strategy work. So it's been 30 years in industry and it was a wonderful journey, but then felt like there was something missing along the way. And so about 8 years ago, I decided to take the big leap and left the corporate world and started my own endeavor, this company that's called Inspired Purpose Partners. And it wasn't an easy transition, that's for sure. It came from this place of feeling like something was missing. And the exploration I went on was to figure out how to get leaders to show up differently in the rooms that I was in. And so that led to coaching, facilitation, writing books, podcasting, the whole journey. And it has landed me in this place where I'm able to facilitate workshops with organizations and teams that want to show up differently, connect at a very personal level, especially exploring identity work about themselves and their teams.
That's super interesting. We do hear a lot about leadership. So tell us, how do you describe it and why leadership coaching is so important? Because I think some people think, leadership, yeah, I got this. I can be a leader, right? I'm sure you probably hear that a lot, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been thinking about the term leadership malpractice lately, which is
Oh gosh, that's great.
yeah, I think there's an element of that, which is to say that anyone can call themselves a leader, and we all lead in some capacity. But the question is, how have you been taught to be a good leader? Effective leaders are different than just leaders by title or leaders just by, I'm going to be a leader. So I think when I think of the term leader, I think the key thing is, how do you serve others in a way that is lifting them up and revealing more of who they really are through the process of your presence. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And one of the great analogies about leadership, and this is something I tap into in my new book, which is coming out soon, is about leaders as, I'll share more about that in a moment, but leaders as lighthouses. And what I love about that analogy is a sense that it's not about just shining bright for the sake of being the brightest person in the room, but it's about leading the way for others. So that sense of being an example, but also illuminating others, creating that path for people to follow, but also shining a light on them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Leaders as lighthouses, because you don't want a leader who thinks they're the smartest person in the room and that they're just going to beat you. What's the saying? Beatings will continue until morale improves. We don't want that, right? We want things that are more really lifting people up, like you said, like giving people a place to really shine and know that their leader or the person who they're working for really has their back. I know that for me personally, even I stayed at companies that I maybe for better or worse, but I did because I was working for somebody I really liked, or I left because even if it was a good situation, because I didn't like the person. So I feel like people leave people, not companies, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's one of the things that in the work that I do, I'm always thinking about. I don't have to fix everything from the top to the bottom, but what I can do is I can come in and work with people wherever they are and create a situation where that team becomes unavoidably seen. They do good work and other people start looking at them and saying, I want what they're having. I want to have that effect that they're having by just creating a spark that is almost unavoidably seen. And it starts by creating a ripple effect wherever we come in and we're able to create an impact. It doesn't always have to come in the place. We always think the C-suite. And I think that's great. And obviously the most effective way to create change. But sometimes you start where you can and you make the effect wherever you're able to.
Right. And a lot of times it is the middle managers, especially when we're talking about big companies, that are the ones grooming the next group of leaders and the next group of. So if we don't have strong leadership there,
Mhm.
then it's like the whole thing's going
Yeah.
to come crashing down.
Yeah, and just even to use another analogy, which we always love these analogies, but if you just focus on one level of leadership, but the message doesn't trickle down, the challenge you have is that it's almost like starving the seeds from getting sunlight. And so that's the analogy I was thinking about is like if you say you want to have the next level of leadership come to be fostered and to grow them, but the problem is oftentimes we don't do the work to actually trickle down the impact of some of the leadership programs that are offered.
hmm
Yeah.
So we'll soon talk about your new book because I can't wait to
Yeah.
hear about that. But you have two books. You're very good at titling, by the way. I really like the title. So, Climbing the Right Mountain is
Yeah.
hello. You want, as an author, I know you want a title where people will stop and say, wait a minute,
Yes.
that's interesting. I need to know more about that. And then Campfire Lessons for Leaders. I love that because
Mhm.
anytime that we can go back to anything that we learned when we were like around a campfire or in kindergarten or whatever can be
Mhm.
super helpful, right? So tell
Yes.
us about those two books and how they've affected people in the world.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. For me, the first book, Climb the Right Mountain, it's basically about mountains, but not necessarily just about mountains. I climb mountains, so it's something that's near and dear to my heart. But the analogy that we're really working with here is that it's about defining success on our own terms. You start to climb the mountains of success, your professional career. And from time to time, you need to check in and say, is this the mountain that I still want to climb? A lot of us get to the top of the mountain and feel like, I got where I did all the work. I did all of the things that people said I should do, but I don't feel successful in those terms. And so sometimes we have to pause along the way and say, okay, well, I said I wanted this, but why? And how do I stop for a moment, pause and take inventory of what I've done, why I'm doing it, and recommit or not to the mountain that I'm on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the kind of the whole plan for that first book. And it really came out of not only my own stories, but also from the people I was talking to who were sharing lessons about their own journey and people who were telling me, yeah, I'm in this job, but I'm sticking around just because I get a paycheck, and if I leave now, I'll leave a lot of money on the table. But I'm like, okay, that's great, but how do you feel about it?
Right. Yeah. I see too often that they get into that hamster wheel, to use another
Mm,
analogy, and basically they're doing the same thing and
yeah,
they are moving forward. In many cases, they're either getting the promotion or getting the bonus or whatever. But is it really aligned with their values? Is it really making them happy? And I love the title about the right mountain because that does make so much sense because I've watched people, friends of mine, who ended up working in a job, never really liked it, but never really left it, didn't know
yeah,
how to change it. And they wake up one day and 20 years have passed.
yeah,
And it
yeah.
happens fast.
It truly does. And I think about it, the whole like concept of being an autopilot. You're just going through the motions and you're stuck in this pattern of rinse, wash, and repeat. And it's easy to get stuck in that because you're doing the work, you're just going about it and you just head down. But from time to time, we need to poke our heads up and ask questions. And I think it's healthy to do that. And it doesn't mean you're going to throw everything away. It just, like I said, it's changing the frame of mind about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And that might be all you need is to say, oh, I'm recommitted to this path because now I've recommitted to why I do it. And I've gotten out of the patterns I've been maybe stuck in that got me feeling a little bit like blasé about the job. Or it might be a time for a complete reset, taking some of the things that I've learned in this current path and thinking, it's time for a new mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, sometimes that happens. That
Yeah.
can happen in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. It could happen
Yeah.
at any time. There's so much happening right now with people starting businesses later in life,
Yeah.
or starting a franchise, or
Mhm.
buying a franchise, or whatever the story is. So there's a lot of things that people can do. That the word retirement isn't necessarily about sitting around a pool all day or golfing.
Yeah. And just thinking about the longevity of our lives these days, thanks to science, we are living much longer. And think about the term of midlife. Chip Conley has been a huge advocate for thinking about how do we navigate midlife. And midlife has become such a long term. I mean, we start midlife even earlier than we used to. 40 is now midlife, and then it extends really long. You could call 60 midlife. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, okay, tell us now about your second book. I love the title of that as well, Campfire Lessons for Leaders. So, how'd you come up with all that?
Yeah. So obviously campfires were a very important part of my youth, but it was also an element of telling stories about campfire that's been part of our origin story as humans. And there's something about the intimacy of those stories that have always connected to who I am and what I'd like. I started a podcast called The Virtual Campfire back in 2020. It's still running a little slower than it used to be, but we're 300 some odd episodes deep.
Wow, that's awesome.
And the book is an encapsulation of some of the big themes that I uncovered through those conversations. And one of the through lines I would say about Campfire is it's about connecting deeper to ourselves through our stories by looking back and uncovering what it is that has helped me to make sense of my life. And how can I use that exploration as a path to connecting with where I'm going to propel my future? And there's a lot of vulnerability in that, obviously, but it doesn't mean that it's supposed to be painful. It's supposed to be a force of reconciliation with our past so that we can understand it and then connect better with others through that.
So, is the book really encouraging leaders then to tell stories within the workplace environment?
It is, but it starts with understanding yourself first. And I think that's where you don't just run off and just start telling random stories or just telling not internalized stories. The key thing is start with understanding yourself through the exploration. Spend time, slow things down, and really understand why did you get to this place where you're doing what you're doing. And I do this with what's called flashpoints. Flashpoints are the moments that have ignited your gifts into the world. And what we do is we try to think about what was my life before that moment? What did I learn through that moment? And how did that change my life afterwards? Sometimes they're dramatic, like maybe a cancer diagnosis, a suicidal moment that obviously we've been able to live through, which is wonderful. Or it could be something as simple as, look, I was doing this career and I got to this point where like, I just can't do it anymore and I need to do something else.
All right. So, tell us, what's book 3 all about?
Yeah, you'd think that the book 3 would be something that is got the campfire or the
Yeah.
outdoors theme. This one is about light, and it's called Illuminating Hidden Brilliance. And there is a connection to my previous books, but the inspiration to this book came from a museum visit. Museums are my kind of my passion. I love museums, and I'm also an artist. So I spend time exploring art and doing art. And I happened to be walking in a museum locally to my house, and I walked into this one particular room, and there was this big black box hanging from the ceiling, and it was intricately carved with these beautiful designs. And then there's a light shine inside. When the light shines in, the pattern just covers everything, the walls, the ceiling, your skin. And it just was this beautiful experience that had me thinking that most of us are just like that, the black box. And until someone turns on that light or finds that hidden element that's inside of us, we're not expressing the full spectrum of who we are. But once we do, something beautiful happens. Yeah. And so that light bulb moment, no pun intended, really changed the way I looked at the people I was working with and even myself. When we bring that hidden sideline element of who we are back into the room, whether it's the artist, the dancer, or even like parts of our story, like being an immigrant or someone who started in a different world, then integrating it back into who we are and showing up that way in our work, you start to see things differently and you become fully expressed. Now, I started to do this with teams, and I found that it's not just about the identity work of finding your identities, integrating them, and expressing them, but it's also about connecting with others and helping them to see the value of that expression. So that's what Illuminating Hidden Brilliance is about, bringing the sideline part of yourself back into the room to feel more fulfilled and to connect better with others.
Amazing. So it sounds like an incredible book for some exercises.
Totally. And then it's very much an action orientated book. And so you'll find as you're navigating, you're discovering about yourself. You're also finding ways to really put it into action to apply what you're learning
I love that. And when does it come out?
in the fall. So it could be a little bit earlier, but right now we're slated for a fall release. It is written, just needs to be put into production.
Right,
So
right. Yes, I know. My most recent book that came out, I finished writing it in August, but you got to go through all the things. There's all the steps. People don't realize
yeah,
how long it takes, even after it's written, that you have to, all the things you have to do.
yeah.
So, in our correspondence before we did the episode, you were talking about brilliance doesn't disappear in organizations. It goes dormant when people are asked to fragment themselves to
Yeah.
perform. And I was just so, I had to sit and think about that for a little bit. I'm like, that is such a profound statement because
Mhm.
it is true. We have been asked to fragment ourselves, but I don't know that I ever thought of it in
Mhm.
that context. So, please explain.
Yeah, and it really aligns with what I was just sharing, but I'll go a little deeper because that fragmentation comes from the sense that we often think of our reward system in an organization is reward based on the title. You think about the job description, you say, okay, for me to be successful, I have to be aligned with what the job description says and my title. So let's just use finance as an example because that was my prior life. I was in finance. So I have to be analytical. I have to be all the things that a finance person typically would be seen as. However, if you want to be fully seen and to be not fragmented as just, okay, I'm going to show up and just be this side of myself, then you can see where are you leaving parts of yourself on the sidelines. Maybe it's the finance person who is a really good storyteller or is able to see things that could also bleed into another area. I was in finance, but I was also in biotech, and I spent a lot of time understanding how the biotech landscape worked. And because of my insights in the industry and my connections in the industry, I started to get involved in business development. And that started to become more of my area of expertise as well. But it could be anything. So I think the fragmentation becomes being defined so narrowly in one dimensional terms, it can be limiting and also frustrating for a person to feel that way. But as soon as you start to work in an organization and start to express that you have more to give than one dimension, it becomes liberating. And it also becomes really a sense of aliveness. It comes back to the table. Make sense?
Yes, I love that. I worked for a company for a long time and I did get labeled in the first role that I had. I was in
Mm.
sales and so sales and marketing. So I got labeled like that, even though I was like, no, I can do all these other things. Look at what I can do in operations. And I was like, I ended up becoming the person who, I don't know, they called me the fixer. If it was something like a really messy problem, like just call Marsha. She's the person who will figure it out. But
Yeah.
it took a long time for people to start to see me in a different light. It's not their fault. It's just the way things happen because you get, to your point, you get narrowly focused into whatever your job title is, whatever you're
Mm.
supposed to be working on. And in a lot of cases, your metrics and your job performance is based on that. So if you are
Yes.
branching out, that might not be looked upon that favorably either, but it could
Mm.
be that you could add a lot more to the organization.
Exactly, and not only is that good for the employee to feel this sense of well, attachment is probably a strong word, but a sense of connection to the organization because the organization starts to see them as, yeah, this person has more in the tank than they're offering, and they don't have to work harder to do it because they're already feeling the sense of energy that comes from they're seeing me for not just this one thing, but other things. And they're taking risks on me to be able to explore this other part of me, which is wonderful. And I think that's the other part of this that organizations have to believe in their people before they're in some new areas or trying new things. that belief is what really gets people to step up and try new things.
Yes. So I know a lot of the people that are listening are either investors in a startup or founders in a startup. So how would you coach a leader who's in a startup? Maybe it's the founder and CEO, but maybe it's other people who, and maybe they don't have that many employees. Maybe they only have
Mhm.
5 or 10 employees. Like, what are some of your tips and tricks?
Well, it starts with getting to know your people a little deeper. And this doesn't mean you have to be personally invested in every single aspect of their lives, but it's just spending a little more time understanding what makes them come alive. Yeah. And this is where a lot of the exploration starts with me is getting them out of their head and into more of the personal exploration of things they do outside of work or things they've done in the past and things that become part of the outside self, bringing them a little bit inside and allowing them to just get to know that. Because as you said, the fixer, right? That's something that's not a job title. That actually
Right, right.
is an identity. And in many ways, that's like cool because then you can start to say, well, as the fixer, that doesn't mean I have to be limited to one area. And they may look at you as saying, hey, we've got this really hairy problem that we need to fix. Would love to have you come be part of it, at least have a voice in the room for it. What do you think? And that becomes an open door. And especially when it comes to the founders and smaller organizations, they don't have a wealth of people who are going to be able to do very siloed roles. If they can find some utility players that have a broad, what I call multidimensional ways of seeing things, that's even better.
Yeah,
So
I love how you talk.
exploration.
I love how you
Yeah.
talk about that multidimensional. Yeah, so tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, multidimensional for me is it's just this idea that we, especially in the world that we're in right now, where AI becomes like a really good specialist. And I'm not saying that specialists are bad, but we have to be able to have a width and a depth. And so that's where we're headed in this world that we're in, is that we want to make sure that people have more dimensions than just the one dimension and going super deep. What we should be able to do is have multiple dimensions that we can work across and also have the ability to go deep when we need to in certain areas. That doesn't mean we have to be the master of all. It just means we have to have the depth enough to be able to get into areas and see how certain things can go across different dimensions. Meaning maybe you're somebody who has a depth in storytelling, but you're also somebody who can really understand data and analysis. And that's wonderful because we do need those cross pollinations.
Totally. Yeah, we hear about AI, oh, they're going to take all these jobs, but I actually think the work that you're doing with multidimensional leadership, talking to people about finding their own strengths and then being able to lift up others, those are things that we need now more than ever,
I
right?
agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's the part that is most important for humans, being good meaning makers and synthesizers. And to take the term that I like to use, integrators. We integrate all the things that we're taking in by utilizing what we see in the world and what AI can help us with, but we can integrate them by making sense of all the things we see.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Tony, we're going to put links to the books and to your website in the show notes, but how else, like, how do people mainly work with you?
Well, the best way to reach out to me or what have you is to find me on my website. My new website, actually, I've got a new
Nice.
website called tonymspeaks.com. It's a central point where you can dig deep, find out more about my workshops, my thought leadership, and what have you. And then the other place that I'm really active is LinkedIn. I post there regularly. I'm always sharing insights and tips and things like that. So feel free to check me out.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Tony. Appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation.
Thanks for listening. To connect with me, visit my website at marciadawood.com. And please subscribe, follow, and leave a review. It helps the podcast get seen by more people. And remember, you can also find the Angel Next Door podcast on YouTube too. And if you're looking to learn more about investing in the changes you want to see in the world, sign up for Ann and Bill Payne's ACA Angel University classes. Go to theangelcapitalassociation.org, all one word, to find out the schedule. And classes are now available on demand. Many classes are offered, everything from angel investing basics, which include fundamentals, risk, due diligence, term sheets, valuations, returns and portfolio strategy, and even a class on group formation. There's even a deeper dive where you can get advanced classes, including capitalization tables, startup boards, and exit strategies. If you're not already a member of the Angel Capital Association, you can become one for a low price that will give you unparalleled access to discounts, free webinars with a huge archive of content, networking opportunities, and much more. We'd love to have you join us. All content for this website is informational and not intended to serve as legal, tax, accounting, or investing advice. While Marcia, that's me, does serve on the SEC Small Business Capital Formation Advisory Committee, my views are my own and not the views of the SEC or my fellow colleagues on the committee. Our speakers and hosts are thoughtfully selected for their educational value, but their opinions are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the host, me, or the Angel Capital Association, and neither specifically endorse the use of presenters' products or services. Listeners of the podcast should consult their own tax, investing, legal, or accounting advisors before making important financial decisions. All warranties, including accuracy, completeness, and suitability for specific purpose, are disclaimed.